I'm in Chilton. I am an athlete mentor with the Dame Kelly Homes Trust. So we work with young people. So we've got a team of about 40 athlete mentors. So, oh dear, the blinds are going. Go home, at least you don't have to deal with that. And so we have a team of about 40 young athlete mentors all over the UK, and we deliver programs in schools and the community. Our age range is typically 11 to 25, but sometimes it goes a bit older, a bit younger, for specific things, and in different regions. So I've worked on programs in Northern Ireland, Wales, and England. I've been over to Jersey. Like we've got programs everywhere. So we work with a range of different people, and I think there's sometimes a bit of confusion in that because it's the Dame Kelly Homes Trust and we are athlete mentors, that it's a sports program, but it isn't. The athlete mentor element comes in whereby we've lived life. People can relate to sport in some way, but it's more to do with the transitional skills that we got out of it, and actually being able to go into settings where maybe young people, some of them are homeless, some of them experience loss, some of them are just not fitting into the education system. Being able to just go in and do things a bit differently on their terms. And so it's exciting. It's interesting. And I think as a mentor, there's a balance between the inspirational piece, because you are trying to inspire them to find what they want to do with their lives or what they want to change. But there's also the empowerment and the enabling. And for me, that's the most exciting part, I think. It's like you can do things differently. You're not a teacher. You're not being governed by certain like regulatory bodies. You can be a bit firmer, but also fairer. And actually, you've got the scope to move things around and do it on their terms. And so we always try to hand over as much of the responsibility to the young people as we can. And that's what I love about it, right? Because they're all different and they all need and want different things. And I think once they realise that you're there because you want to help them, rather, not that anyone that works with them doesn't want to help them, but they think sometimes they've had experiences where they're like, oh, you have to be here, so you're here. Because I don't have to be here, and nor do you. Like, this is all our programs are optional, and therefore something changes in them. Especially like when you work, like I live in South Wales, and Brazil. My husband's Brazilian, so we sort of split our time. So I've delivered, I know, right? Newport, Brazil. But I delivered virtually from Brazil, like 4 a.m. But similarly, I've driven to Southampton, or like I said, flown to Belfast, and then driven up to like the top of Northern Ireland. And once they realise the effort you're putting in to see them and to work with them, they commit to you as well. And yeah, and so you get that mutual investment. And I think for me, that's extremely important. And like I said, there's a range of people, and it's not the only job I do. And that's the thing, is a lot of the athlete mentors, well, the majority of the athlete mentors, it's not their only role. So again, you don't get that sort of burnout and that exhaustion. You can be fresh for those young people every time you see them, and you can take that energy, hopefully, and that excitement. And again, we're a diverse group of athlete mentors. We've done different sports, we've got different experiences, we've won different things, we've lost different things, we come from different backgrounds. And as a result, you can sort of match up young people to athlete mentors. But similarly, if we've got a group that particularly likes something, or particularly in a space, then we can draft in our other athlete mentors to work with us. And I think that variety helps them sometimes. You can ask questions at any point if you want. Sorry, you can't. My fault. But yeah, you can ask you can ask questions at any time if you want. And I know this is specifically a little bit more about disability mentoring, but I always think inclusion is inclusion. Yeah. And I am a Paralympian. I am Paralympian. I was a Paralympic swimmer. I've retired now. And the picture sort of gave that away. But I was super fortunate to go to 3 Paralympic Games. Athens in 2004. I like to think I'm older than I look. Beijing in 2008, and then London in 2012. I went to the Commonwealth Games in Manchester in 2002, and then last year in Birmingham I was commentating. So I've gone full circle, really. So I am very, very fortunate, but I think I've also, it hasn't always been easy. like not no one needs to get the violin out, but I think that helps with the young people. I think like you show them a gold medal, and like some of them love it, right? Some of them are sports fanatics and they've got all these questions and the sport engages them. But more and more now that is not the case. And actually that I'm like, this is only a part of who I am. Like it's not all of who I am. And as a result, then you open up to them. I think the key when you're like again from the mentor position, the beauty of it is you can show them your vulnerabilities. Do you know, like and they respond to that as well, because I think quite often they're used to authority telling them what they can and can't do or how they should and shouldn't feel. And I often, like in schools, when they come in and they're raging about something, you're like, "What's the problem?" And they'll tell you, and you're like, "Well, that would annoy me too," you know. And then you're like, "Right, what would make this situation better for you?" And just giving them some of the power, I think, massively helps. Like I said, that applies to everybody really, not just disabled people. But I think there like we'll look at it in a minute. But like I think there is a disparity even further for people with disabilities, because I think there's just the way that society views disabled people, and like, but I always find that having like my disability is only part of who I am, but because the nature of being a Paralympian means that people are like, oh, you must have a disability, so then it kind of opens up that conversation, and instantly the young people feel like they can ask me stuff, and then they sort of relate it to their contextualize to their issues, because like, everybody thinks someone's worse off than them, right? Whether they are or they're not, we've all got our ideas of best and worst case, and I think it's quite powerful. So for me, we can go to the next slide. You want Barry?
Yeah.
For me, like I think whether I'm working with young people, whether I'm working in corporates, whether I'm working on TV, like I've got this idea that like parity opportunity is key, and actually giving people what they need to be successful is, as a mentor, all I aim to do. And like appreciating that not everybody is motivated by competition or not, and actually young people at the moment really struggle to think what motivates them. Like that has been, I think, one of the biggest changes I've noticed since and like we're not blaming the pandemic for anything, but I think during the pandemic nobody could do anything, so you didn't dream about doing anything, did you? You didn't think about anything, you didn't have any barriers, because you, other than you couldn't go anywhere, so you weren't trying to break those barriers down. And I think as a result, a lot of young people now are like, well, I don't know, what do I want to do, or what? So I always try to ask them to explain what they don't think about, what they don't want, and work backwards from that. And that's what I did. Like I'm like at school, I just got rid of all the subjects I didn't like, and then I like when I was going to university, I made a list of what like all the good swimming pools and all the good business schools, because that's what I thought I would do, and I picked on that basis. And they're like, oh, like it doesn't have to be complicated, right? But it is quite empowering. And I think for me, like particularly in terms of disability, this is where I like, because I also, like I said, most athlete mentors do other things as well. And I'm fortunate, I work in broadcasting, and I'm working as an executive producer for the Paris Paralympic Games, which is pretty cool. But I set up in 2018. I set up a consultancy that was all about increasing meaningful employment opportunities for disabled people. And it came from my lessons, like life lessons as a mentor, and it came from like I saw a gap, I saw a problem, and I couldn't fix it all by myself, but I could help people fix it. And I think for that, but I carry that back into my mentoring as well. And I think like my main aim is to like remove that stigma around disability, because I think one of the biggest problems is that people don't really understand the difference between having a disability and being disabled, or what it means to be disabled in 2023. Like, and people judge you on what they can see, which we all know is not the ideal. So for me, I think that's like I'm looking at making things as accessible and diverse as possible, but not just diverse in how you see it, diverse in the experiences and the ideas that come in, and all of those things as well. So I've got a little activity, because I love an activity, because I'm an athlete mentor. Yeah. So on the next slide, there'll be 2 circles, a blue or red. Like one, I mean, they're not blue or red on this screen, they're like, that was definitely blue, but that one's a sort of dirty orange color. So the dirty orange, so one of them is slightly bigger than the other. There's not much in it, but one is slightly bigger than the other. So pick whether you think it's the blue or the dirty orange. Dirty orange. Yeah. Dirty orange. Dirty orange. Any takers at the back? Are we all on the Dirty Orange page? Anyone on the blue page? Everyone made the decision? Anyone sitting on the fence, not convinced? They look quite similar, Barry says.
Yeah, but I'll go with, I'm still.
You go with it, you go with the
I think it is, but.
All right, okay, hiya. So the answer is actually that they are the same size. Did anybody have an inkling when they first looked that they were the same size? Yeah. But I told you that one was bigger than the other. You're rule followers, you trusted me, yeah? Exactly. And that is ultimately the problem with society, is that we learn to believe a narrative that we're told or that we're shown. And actually, if we're put under enough pressure, Barry's a classic example of that, because he had a better view because his are blue and red, right? And to be fair, the red does always look slightly bigger, but then it's not. But Barry was like, oh, they look the same, but everyone's going with the orange, so I'll go with the orange. And like, actually, you played right into my hand. But not, and that's not a criticism, but that is just to illustrate, like, that is life. And actually, that is what young people are up against today, whether it's what they're wearing or where they're from or what their favorite subject is or what subject they're finding challenging at school or how many siblings they've got or what sort of household they come from, like, or if they're disabled or if they belong to any of the marginalised groups of society. There's judgment everywhere, right? Everybody judges based on what they can see, really. And so we'll go to the next slide, please, Barry. And then so like it all comes down to this idea of unconscious or implicit bias, and actually the two mean the same, like they're referring to the same thing, but there's been a shift towards calling it implicit bias rather than unconscious bias, because when we talk about unconscious bias, unconscious almost gives us an excuse that we didn't need to know about it, and now it's a reason, but it's not an excuse. And I think unconscious bias is only unconscious for a very small amount of time. Like, as soon as your attention is brought to it, then it's no longer unconscious, right? And whereas if we think of it more as implicit bias, it just flicks our mindset to take a bit of ownership on exploring that unconscious bias that we have. And I think it all comes from this idea that society's perfect person exists. Like, I always work on the basis that it's like the world thinks if you are, I'm gonna do it, I'm sorry team, but like a white, pale, stale, male, straight, like, and you belong to a certain group, you're 100%, right? And that's not to say you're not 100%, you might be. But then if you, and you're strong and you've got all those things going on, you like middle class and you've got a good job, you've got a good education, then you're 100%. And then anything down from there, you lose points. So like, if it's the color of your skin, or if it's where you were born, or if it's your socioeconomic background, or if you're disabled, and like you just continually lose points. And so you meet people, and people are always trying to like fix you in inverted commas, or explain away your difference, and you're like, rather than appreciating your difference and who it's made you, but also the influence and impact it has on your life. And I think, and this is like a game of top trumps, right? Like I've got colleagues with disabilities who've got brown skin who never get asked about their brown skin ever, or never get singled out for their brown skin, or are Muslim and never get asked about their religion. And similarly, I, as a female, never get questioned about being a female. Like, I never get discriminated against being a female because my disability is seen as a bigger barrier. So people will always go, oh yeah, but like, I played in the school cricket team with the boys because everyone was just so impressed I could play cricket that well. Like, they completely overrode the gender barrier because they were happy with like, does that make sense? And it's a strange world that we live in, but this idea that perfect person exists, it means that people make quick judgments based on what they can see, and the majority of people's challenges are invisible, whether that be hidden disabilities, which account for over 70% of disabilities, which is a lot. Like, I think a lot of people, when you think of, if someone asks you what you think of when you think of disability, typically you think of a wheelchair because that's how it's presented. But it's only about 8% of disabled people with disabilities are wheelchair users. It's a really low number, but that's what you think of when you think of. So there's that idea, but then also that has the implication on the young people because they're being judged. They're seeing things all the time, and so I guess that leads me to my question, like, what does this mean for young people? Like, what does this, like, these stereotypes, these prejudices, these judgments. Like, how is that impacting my young people at the moment? I don't know if anybody's got anything. No. No audience participation. Okay. You don't have
No, sorry. So I mean, I run single identity work groups, previously, and concerned what those impacts are on young people. I think what you're saying is right. A lot of these young people have to realign their own views and opinions of themselves, because it's Eddie and I got around this. It was fascinating. It was around it's not the disability that disables the person, it's the environment.
absolutely.
How do we approach that? So anytime I've tried to work in that area, that's always been in the back of my mind but it's also, you need to move beyond the idea of I'm doing this to make life comfortable for you and make it easy for you. It's about then trying to develop in those young people.
Yeah.
This is what you need to do. This is how you need to challenge what's going on. But we need to come behind you collectively.
Yeah.
And challenge, it's not on your behalf, it's with you.
Yeah, and I think that's just really important point, because and that lends to the empowerment piece, because I think a lot of young people don't feel like they're in control.
Yeah.
And actually, again, depending on what their difference is or their previous experience, like they don't feel like they're in a position to advocate for themselves. And I guess you're talking about being an ally, and that allyship looks different for different groups of people. And I think that when we talk about mentoring, like, you can be an ally, but then that being an ally for a disabled person is one step up, because I think, like you said, people think it can often the help or assistance or facilitation for people with disabilities specifically comes from a place of, you need my help, or charity, because that's how it's presented in society, right? Like it's the one thing that people feel probably most uncomfortable with. I'm not saying they don't feel uncomfortable with other differences. They stumble around to try to find the right word or the right pronoun, and they're like, oh, I don't know what to do. But they genuinely see that person as not as able, and therefore are not as capable. And I think that's the key, is they are as capable, but to your point, they're not always as able, because the society, like the environment, doesn't let them be. So and it is about helping them reevaluate where they belong, because I think they're led to believe that they're led to believe that, because when you're young, you do look to adults to guide you, and you do look to medics for the narrative, and so if you don't know something, that's where you go to what you perceive to be the expert. But they don't always know, and they don't always have that viewpoint, because they've got very different perspectives on what they're trying to achieve to make you a better person. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so next slide, we'll go to the next slide, Barry. And this idea is all around ableism. I don't know, like, it's quite commonly a word that's commonly used, and the misconception is that ableism is literally able versus disabled, but actually any marginalized group of society can be on the receiving end of ableism, because ableism can be defined as a system that places value on people's bodies and minds based on society's idea of what is desirable in intelligence, physical ability, excellence, and productivity. So that's kind of what we were talking about, right? And then this form of systemic oppression leads to a society determining who is valuable and worthy of acceptance based on their ability to produce, excel, behave, and conform. And I think so. Ableism is quite prevalent, but more of a pressing issue for young people and adults who we try to kid is that this idea of internalized ableism, where you almost carry that burden of the ableism. So you're like, think how many, if you're different in any way, think how many times you've apologized before giving your opinion, or if you're disagreeing with something, and you're like, I'm sorry, I just think I might be wrong, but like you prefixes that. Or like, I've got a colleague, and his name is Adil, but he's like, no one can say it like that. So he's like, I just introduced myself as Adil. I'm like, so then, and then he carries that, or if you, and like I said, it's not just about having a disability here. This is about, like, this happens to people all the time. If people typically wear traditional dress, but they're like, oh, it won't be accepted there, so I'm not going to do that. Like, we're constantly, or if someone uses the wrong pronoun and you don't correct them because you're like, oh, fine, whatever. But it's not fine, whatever. Like, if it's making you feel uncomfortable, You shouldn't have to do that. And I think people with disabilities often accept poor behavior towards them because and the issue is that because it comes from a place of good intention in inverted commas, it's almost camouflaged and disguised in a way that then they don't feel like they can challenge because they're like, oh, they were trying to help. Classic example is, again, I've got another colleague, or like it happens to me all the time. Like I'll be at the airport and I've got cerebral palsy, I'm hemiplegic, so I like right side weakness. My left side is pretty like dominant, so I'm pretty one-sided. Not with my opinions, but I am pretty one-sided. So I will go to the airport and I appreciate things the way I'm doing it looks awkward, right? So I will, and people will say, do you want help? And I'll say, no, thank you. I make it look more awkward than it is. Like I'm fine, like because this is how I always do it. But then, and sometimes people are like, yeah, but then others go, well, let me help you anyway. And I'm like, get off me. Like, don't touch me. You know what I mean? Or don't touch my stuff, you know? Like, and actually, but that's that ableist thinking as if they know better than I know. And I think that's not like, but again, I am fortunate enough that I've had my career in swimming massively helped me because it immersed me in a world where there's lots of different people who, and some were older, some were younger, and they've given me a platform to advocate for others. And the more I think about advocating for others, the more I think about how actually, no, I accept treatment. I accept behavior that's not acceptable towards me either. Like when people say, what's wrong with you? And I used to answer them. Like, because I'm like, because there is a time and a place, right? If you're little children and they ask you, like there's an opportunity to educate them so they move through into adulthood and they change society because they've got a better. But when somebody stops me in the street randomly and doesn't even know my name and goes, oh, what happened to you? I'm like, it's none of your business. Like, no. And also, like, I am okay, like, with who I am and my disability. I've had it my whole life. So I am blissfully ignorant to how easy the world could be, right? But there's plenty of people that present like me that have been through some trauma because essentially it's brain damage. And like, so that can come from a stroke, that can come from an accident. And if that individual is on their first day out of the house, like they've taken 6 months to get themselves to the point where they can stand at the crossing, and you're like, what happened to you? It might be like, it might shatter them, right? So I'm like, I realized I have a responsibility to other people, and actually that internalized ableism can become a problem. So this kind of leads on to what you were saying. Thanks, Barry. Have you anyone heard of the medical model of disability? See, and like, so what you were talking about was what the social model of disability, right? So the medical model of disability is historically what paved the way for the way that people perceived disability. So essentially, it works on the basis, sometimes called the medical context or a history of disability, but essentially it works on this idea that if you are born different in any way, medically, with any illness, disability, deformity, or indifference, then you are less than, you are broken. And the medical world's job is to try and fix you and restore you to be like everybody else that's typical. Like that's the medical model. It's unbelievable, isn't it? But because that was the narrative, that is why people historically who had disabilities were treated the way they were treated, because they were seen as broken, seen as needing help, seen as needing pity, seen as needing charity. And but leading on, so if we go to the next slide, it's like that. See, so the problem is centered around the problem being me. As a disabled person, I am the problem. I am the one that has broken the system here. And actually, like then this idea that I can't walk. I mean, I can walk, but I can walk with a splint. Like without this splint, I'm not that. And I can do a lot of things, but sometimes I need more time or more equipment or another person. Like, but the idea is that it's my fault, right? That is how the medical system works. And it looks at all the bad things and it focuses on those. And then what happens is, as a parent of a disabled child, they don't adjust the milestones or the way. If you get a good doctor, they can be empathetic, right? And they can be a bit understanding. But typically the medical model does not adjust. So like my friend, for example, she had a second child was born with Down syndrome. And they found out while he was still in the womb. But the way that information was delivered was, I'm really sorry to tell you, we've got bad news. And like, she knew nothing. And she's like, now she said, I feel bad at how bad I felt, because actually our life is fine and he's brilliant. But there was little information and it was all quite negative. And I think he started walking when he was 2, which was a huge achievement. And he's mobile and it's amazing. But every time he went to an appointment, it was like, oh, by now he should be able to. And you're like, let's adjust, shall we? Because that doesn't make anybody feel good. But that's how young people in like that we're mentoring, that's the experiences that they're having if they've got any difference, hidden or physical. And so then what we were talking about was, has anyone else heard of the social model disability? See, and interestingly, a lot of people have heard of the social model, but not the medical model. And the reason for that is because the social model is really how we should live our lives. Like, the social model is exactly how you were saying. If we go to the next slide, please, Barry. So this idea that the problem is the disabling world that we live in. So I'll use myself as an example. I have a disability, right? My disability is cerebral palsy. That is my diagnosis. I have it all the time. I don't wake up some days with it and some days with that. Now, there are some disabilities that fluctuate, but mine does not. I always have it. And even when people have disabilities that fluctuate, they still have it. It just impacts them differently on different days. But if I have what I need to be successful and I have that equity, then I can do what other people do. I just do it differently. So let's take driving a car, for example. I drive a car, but I drive an automatic car, and my accelerator is on the left, and I have a steering ball on my steering wheel. Now, the objective is to drive a car, right? So if you, by using the social model, driving is possible for me. But if, oh, I'm on the way, sorry, go ahead. If I am in a position where the only car available is a manual car, stick shift, then I can't drive and I am disabled. And the thing is that any of us can be disabled at any time. Any of us can acquire a disability, that is also true. But we are disabled by things other than our physical or intellectual or mental capabilities, right? That's the reality. And that's what the social model focuses on, really. And so that's how we should lead. Because the only people really that ever need to lead with the medical model is the person with the disability themselves or their medic, right? Because and actually the majority of the time I lead with the social model for myself. But then in a situation where so this leg flares up sometimes with my split because I don't really feel that leg, and then I get hot and it'll get cut and it'll get infected and I don't realize, and then I can't walk. So then I use my medical model to be like, actually, this leg is hurting. I can't move. I can't put that splint on today. Therefore, I can't walk. Therefore, I can't go to work or whatever. Right. So very, very, not very often do I have to lead with a medical model. Now, there are people, like I said, I've got other colleagues, and one of my colleagues, his impairment is a lot more significant than mine. So he will often consider like what he eats so that he doesn't choke, or what the temperature is somewhere. Like he doesn't always lead with the medical model, but doesn't matter. He has no function from like shoulders down. So he's like, it doesn't matter how many ramps you put out or how good my wheelchair is. He's like, I can move around, social model, but I'm never going to be able to walk, medical model, right? So there is a place for it, but as an individual working with young people who have disabilities or anybody, we never need to lead with the medical model, which is why your answer was so helpful, so refreshing to hear. So so that's ultimately what guides us when we're working with these young people. And I think then, like, how can we help them? What can we do for them? It's like increase, like you were saying, increase their education, increase our education, exposure and empathy, but also increase their exposure and education and empathy. And like at Dame Kelly Stress, we work with lots of different people and lots of different young people with lots of different challenges. But we did do one specific program where they only recruited people who had a registered disability. And we did it virtually, number one, because it was in the pandemic, but number two, because it enabled us to get people with similar goals for life together and similar experiences, not similar situations, but experiences, to be empathetic towards each other, to help each other and to motivate each other to move forward. Because I think on these programs, we really focus on increasing their motivation, their resilience, their self-esteem and their confidence, because I think that is lacking for a lot of people right now. And what happened was we had every day, every session we'd open with some life hacks. And like, how do you do this? And you're like, oh, I do it like this. And it was so empowering, because a lot of them, that information is not found. And now like I said, as a Paralympian, I was exposed to more disabled people. And therefore, when I was younger, I had short hair because I couldn't tie it up by myself. So I cut it all off, because my independence was more important to me than how I looked. That was a bit of a mistake when I look back at my photos, but at the time I felt empowered.
Yeah.
And I don't regret it. But then I met people, and it would be like, oh, how do you tie your hair up with one hand? And they would show you, and I'm like, oh, this is how you put your socks on with one hand. Or when I wanted to learn to drive, there were people older than me, and I didn't realise, because obviously my family didn't ring enough alarm bells, but no one had told my parents that I could learn to drive when I was 16. But I was younger, and the older ones, I was like, how does that happen? And so it was quite an informative base to me. And I think we come from a place where historically, again, because of the medical model, there was this idea that SEN schools were bad. If you went to a special educational, and again, the language is not ideal, special or additional needs, because in my opinion, you've either got needs or you haven't. They're not additional, they're just needs. But you do need a way in the education system to differentiate between who needs what help. But again, it affects the narrative and the perception moving forward when you leave school. But there was this perception that was bad. You do everything you can to go to mainstream school, but actually some people thrive when they've got what they need to be successful, and the only way they get that is in a different system, and that's okay. But we need to educate people around that, so that, because it is typically people don't expect to have a child with a disability, and therefore most of the paraphernalia that you read or the information doesn't talk about it, because people don't even want to plant the seed in your head. So when you are in that position and you need that information, where do you go? How do you find it? You find it from other people that have been in that situation. You look for people that you can see yourself in. And I think that's where we've got that responsibility. So I guess next slide. We're nearly done, I promise. So in terms of setting us up for success, as individuals, for the young people also, but for us as mentors and those worked with, it's how do we help them rethink their thinking? Because I think the idea that sometimes the idea is also that they should have the answers. Because you know your situation better than everyone else. But because of all the other stuff we've talked about this morning, sometimes they don't get an opportunity to explore that. Because they're just told. And so this idea of creating us, and we're trying to help them create equity, but we sometimes have to create that equitable opportunity for them to say what they need or discover what they need. And I talk about normalizing difference a lot. It's normal to be different. We're in this room or online, and we are all different. Okay, we might have some similarities, but we all have differences as well, and nobody considers that. But yet certain differences are deemed to be weakness, or deemed to not be okay, or deemed to require additional pity or charity. And again, that goes back to the reason that is true, but the only reason it's true is because we don't live in an environment where people can access what they need to be successful. So recognizing people's strengths and actually show, sometimes the young people will say, oh, but I'm not good at anything. And I'm like, well, that's not true, is it? Talk me through your day. What have you had to do to get here today? Or how do you do that? Where did you develop that technique? That you didn't learn that. You didn't learn it like everybody else. So helping them recognize their strengths, and also sometimes us recognizing where their strengths might be if they can't see them in themselves, and then creating that understanding that those unnecessary barriers can be removed. And to your point, it's okay to challenge. And if you're not comfortable challenging for yourself, then we'll help you challenge, or do it for you initially. If you need me to pave that way, then I will do that. We had a young person who'd gotten into university, but they were told that there was no accessible accommodation left. It was probably best if they went somewhere else or didn't come. But because of their experiences previously, they accepted that. And I'm like, no, that won't be happening. Let's go. Do you know what I mean? But again, it's unfair to expect the people who are different in any way to carry that burden of other people's ignorance. And like prioritize inclusive processes. And again, I think with disabled people, what happens typically is there is no way on this earth anymore that you would have a male and female entrance, or a black and white, like people with black skin, people with white skin entrance, or people of that religion, people of that, you just wouldn't have it, right? Yet with disability, often it's like, oh, we've tried everything we can, sorry, we can't make it better. And you're like, replace that with a different demographic of society and it would not be okay. And so I think that's sort of the narrative that we have to continue to help these young people push. But it's exhausting, but recognizing that it's exhausting. We all know whatever difference we have is exhausting. Even like if you're trying to sort childcare out, like it's exhausting. Like anything different is hard work because it doesn't suit the majority. So we're nearly there, Barry, I promise. If you press that something, so like we're looking at like action and change. So like what needs to be done and where will you start? And that's and then. And like I always start, what's the one thing that you can do? I would say, okay, between now and our next session. And it doesn't have to be groundbreaking, it doesn't have to be huge, it just has to be something that they feel like they've progressed. And then it goes to us as well. I don't expect you to have the answers now because I've realised that audience participation is not really our thing today. That's okay. And yeah, so they are, I guess that's what sets us up for success. Bearing all of these things in mind. I think because these young people are amazing. And like they always thrive when they're given the environment that they need. And I appreciate that not every organisation has the time or the resource to do that. And I always feel it's a privilege as an athlete mentor to be able to do that. But the principles don't need to disappear. And actually, if we put, it's not like let's not focus on what we can't do, but let's focus on what we can do. And I think together we can change their world, but they change our world as well. And like for me, it all started one more go, Barry, with it. Started with that. Well, it didn't start with that gold medal, but it started with the pursuit of that gold medal. And it would be amiss of me not to recognise that gold medal has opened doors and given me a platform to facilitate change and empower change. But actually, every young person has their version of a gold medal, and I just see it as our role to enable and empower them on that journey, on that pursuit. I'm not saying we can make it all happen, but we can sometimes be the change that they need. So that is it for me, really. I don't know if anybody's got any questions. Thank you.
Any questions for Liz?
All right, if you haven't, you can email it to me. You can take, like, if you want to take a photo of that and email it to me, you can email them if you want. I mean, this piece of work is never done, is it?
Sorry, it's not a statement rather than a question, but just when you were talking, I was thinking about something that in my work 4 weeks back as a practitioner. How do we do and how do we help and how do we facilitate? It's just having it on your periphery that changed. I was doing a mental health one-shot for young people, and I happened to have a phone line on the desk, and I spoke up as a leader. So I work for the Scouts, so a volunteer leader. I phoned, and I get on really well with Kira. And it dawned on me that Kira's a wheelchair user, and she, the work that she does for herself and leading those groups is fantastic. But I just created like a yoga. It's just mindfulness. It was like trying to deliver a yoga session. And if I hadn't been for that phone call with Kira, I remember she was in a wheelchair. I would write, it was an instruction step by step, how do you deliver this? I thought, hang on a minute. Is Kira going to deliver that? Because this is not how you get yourself where you are. So it was then I went and looked, how do you do yoga in a static place? And it was about between that link and the resource. Yeah, but it's stuff like that. It's just being mindful that when you're creating a program or an activity, that if it's not as easy and straightforward, I'm not going to do a step by step how to do it in the chair, but I'm going to put the link in the resource or a connection. So if you want to pick that up.
Yeah, or you can ask her to do a step by step in a chair. Yeah, exactly. No, it's true. Like I regularly, like sometimes there'll be things and I'm like, can anyone do, I don't know, and do you want to demonstrate? If there's someone in the class, because I'm like, I can demonstrate it, but you don't want to be doing it like I do it because like it's not going to go well for you. Like, whereas this is my way. So like sometimes, and that's the thing, is like not everybody has to do everything. And I think we live in this world like where historically that was it. You just go harder, better, faster, stronger, no quitting, no weakness. Like, but weakness is a strength. And I think as a mentor, showing our vulnerability, I think I said this again, but showing our vulnerability to those young people massively opens up and creates that safe space for them to like feel that they can be like they see you as a real person who has problems. Not like, because I think sometimes when people see a gold medal, they're like, oh yeah, easy, you must have had it easy. Like, I don't think so. So yeah, I think it really helps. But anyway, yes.
Yeah, you know, I walked past your room twice before you actually came in.
Oh.
And I'm happy I did, because it was an amazing presentation.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm coming from a situation where we are trying to have more inclusive programs, but we're still struggling, as you pointed out, with the medical model. And we have not really come around to the social model. We have, but in terms of the actual, how it's actually operationalized, we have not actually reached, you know, that standard where we're able to provide, you know, those, remove all of those barriers for our persons with disabilities. But it is something that we're trying to do. It's a work in progress to try to, you know, become a lot more inclusive in terms of programming. So I just want to say that because really, truly, I found it very amazing to be here.
Oh, thank you. No, I think you acknowledge it is hard. And I think sometimes people need to see stuff to believe it. Like I went to India for a wedding. Like my friend's colleague was getting married in India. And I went because it's good. He's my best friend. I'd made him come to a wedding to with me in Portugal because my husband couldn't come. So I was like, yeah, I'm up for a wedding in India. It'd be amazing. And it was. But we went to the family home for the whatever it was. And his dad had recently had a stroke. Well, 6 months ago, I think. So he presented very similarly to me, like as I referred to earlier. But they were like, he was in the corner and everyone was going to him, and it was like it was really seen as a problem and like a sad thing. And like I don't think anything of it because this has always been me, and I was just doing my thing. And I could feel the eyes staring at me, and for once, it wasn't because I had a disability. It was because they were like, you could see them trying to like work out how I was just functioning like my peers, like with my peers. And like, it was because but again, that was the medical model leading the way, is that he used to be able to do certain things in a certain way, and now he can't do them like that. And so I think with things like that, like, again, it's quite nice to immerse, like we travel a lot on work, like do some work, like, you know, like do a few days in different schools or in different communities, because people need to see things to believe them. And I think once, like, and that's half the problem is with hidden disabilities and hidden differences, people expect things they don't understand because they can't see it. But I think, yeah, there's definitely things that could be done or we could help you with to push, especially because when people want it to happen, it's so frustrating when it doesn't, isn't it? But go on.
No, I would say that, I mean, your final statement in relation to your gold medal, because it's amazing what, you know, in terms of confidence that does for you. But
Yeah.
the majority of, well, not the majority, I mean, it's more than the majority of persons with disabilities that will not have that kind of gold medal like you. And therefore they tend to remain a lot hidden. But I know in terms of what happens in Barbados, because I'm from Barbados. Our special
Barbados and help you. Yeah.
Our special Olympics team does really well. But you know, in terms of that, I think that is something that in terms of, you know, what we do or what we can do, we can use those persons to actually, you know, do as you do in relation to the mentoring partner. So, you know, as I said, I'm happy you came in this room because, you know, it brought some ideas.
Well, that's one of the reasons I do what I do now, is that my gold medal, and don't get me wrong, it's amazing and it was a great pursuit and I'm very grateful. But I was privileged that I had an outlet to achieve in the area that I was good at. And I think the problem, and like in many respects, the Paralympic movement is incredible, and London 2012 was really good at moving the dial. But as you point out, the majority of people don't even go to the Paralympics, let alone have a medal and let alone have a gold one. So most people just want the opportunity to live their life, work, earn money and pay a mortgage or rent. And the focus is not there yet. And like why? And so one of my big aims is to transition those lessons that we've seen in sport, take to the wider society, because there's a lot more people to impact in wider society than there is in sport.
Thank you. So why isn't if there's, and the reason why I'm asking that question is because back home, So come over here to this conference.
Where do you live?
I remember Belfast.
I worked in Belfast a lot, like before the pandemic.
That's really eye-opening because we're not bigging ourselves up in Ireland, but honestly, we seem to be 10 years ahead of everybody.
Yeah,
In terms of the work
until
that
you
we do.
get a bus. So if you leave city centre Belfast, I
Yeah.
worked on a programme and it was up in the Derg.
Yeah.
And there was two young people. One was a permanent wheelchair user. He had spina bifida. And the other had cerebral palsy, diplegia. So she was mobile, but not very, very like used to fall over. And if they wanted to get a bus, they used to have to ring 24 hours in advance, and the bus would come and get them. And they had to tell them what time the bus, like even a typical Translink bus.
So they're all
So-
going to have so very different. But
Yeah.
in terms of, that's a great example for yourself, in terms of the work that we do.
But I think, yeah, you're like that as well.
And how we're, so my first experience working with disabled people was running an ASD group.
Yeah.
And it was billed at that time, we need help as an inclusion group. We need to get these young people included into the mainstream youth club that was running. And it was quickly, we quickly worked out that that might be the goal of the funder. These guys just want to be together because they hadn't had an opportunity to explore who they were, understand their own disability with other peers, because it had been in a very strict setting
Yeah.
within school and education. You were there to learn and achieve. But in terms of social aspect, it didn't happen. And it's one of the proudest pieces of work I ever did, because all I did was applied youth work models
Take
to
it.
ASD
Yeah.
young people, and there was nothing. And we said, we need to do this, you need to understand that. But it was just working, starting where the young person's at. And that's just youth work. You start where the young person's at, regardless of,
Yeah.
and you make the changes and the adjustments necessary to make them feel
So
comfortable.
people
doing
to
that.
participate.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if you're disabled or
No.
work with young people who have addiction issues,
Yeah.
a whole range of issues. You start and you change your environment to suit them.
What do they
brings
need?
them along.
What do
Yeah.
they need to be successful? And I think you're right. I'm Welsh, and we have the same thing. Like, I think sometimes you benefit from being in a smaller environment because you can have a better connection, and there's less red tape to get through and process to make things happen, because there is a smaller group. So those people, you can get to know them, you can get to know their needs, you can create that comfortable environment and tell you what they want, and you can make it happen. But yeah, no, it's so good that that's what you're doing, because I think that is what, so like, and then I think the reason it doesn't happen is because, again, it's all linked to these stereotypes and prejudices and how disability is represented in society. And actually, people, like I said, people can relate to sport, right? So they watch the Paralympics and they're like, right, that person is trying to get from A to B as fast as they can. Oh, look, they're doing it with disability, amazing. But actually, it's been on TV long enough now, and there's enough education to know that they're elite athletes who happen to have a disability. But the same work is not done in the corporate world. The same priorities is not prioritized. It's the first thing to go if the budget's tight. It's the first, it's HR's responsibility, but it's not HR's responsibility. HR should be embedded in it across the entire organization, because then you're seen as different. And again, it all comes down, I think, to help, to getting to a place where we just recognize that difference is normal. And and that for me is the foundation of it. Yeah, over. Have a nice day. So thank you so much for being such an attentive audience. Good questions, good chat. If you need anything, like I said, just ping me an email or a message. And have a good rest of the day. If I get to help you in Barbados, I definitely will.
Thanks, Liz.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you.